My psycho father attacked me with a baseball bat for being too soft. Then he and my brother destroyed my social work career through lies and manipulation. So I fought back by becoming everything I hated. My father is an insecure little betch. You see, from the time me and my older brother Marcus were little kids, he had this obsession with making us into real men. Every morning at 5 a.m., we had to do this thing called warrior training, where we'd punch each other until someone bled. If you cried or tried to block too much, Dad would make you stand outside in your underwear holding cinder blocks above your head. Men don't feel cold, he'd say, while we shivered until our lips turned blue. I always thought it was insane, but Marcus, he lived for that she-tea. By age 12, he was voluntarily sleeping on the concrete floor because beds make you soft. He'd do push-ups until he threw up, then keep going while Dad filmed it for his Facebook, captioning it, "Now this is how you raise wolves, not sheep." Meanwhile, I found other ways to prove myself. Got straight A's, became captain of the debate team, tutored kids after school. When I showed Dad my report card, he literally tore it in half. Books are for PCs who can't fight. Your brother broke a kid's nose yesterday. That's an achievement. The moment I knew Marcus was completely gone was during Thanksgiving when I was 16. We were eating dinner when he suddenly stood up and punched himself in the face, hard. His nose started gushing blood all over the turkey. "Pain is just weakness leaving the body," he said, grinning with blood in his teeth while Dad gave him a standing ovation. Mom just kept eating like nothing happened, so I started pretending. I'd wrap my hands before practice, but pull my punches. I'd act hyped about Dad's stupid Navy SEAL documentaries. Even dated this aggressive girl named Brittany, who liked to start fights at parties, just so Dad would see me as alpha enough, all while secretly seeing a therapist and applying to colleges across the country. I ended up at Berkeley studying social work, specializing in toxic masculinity and trauma. 6 years later, I was 24 with my MSW, working with at-risk youth. I'd built a whole life, had an apartment with my girlfriend Sophia, a ballet teacher Dad would call useless, ran workshops on healthy masculinity, even had a rescue dog named Tofu. When Dad called inviting me to Marcus's accomplishment ceremony, I assumed it was a fight tournament or something. I decided to go, partly out of hope that they'd changed, and partly out of morbid curiosity. I should have known something was wrong when Marcus answered the door. He looked like a skeleton wrapped in muscle, covered in fresh bruises and cuts. His knuckles were permanently swollen, and he walked with a limp. "Little bro," he said, grabbing me in a hug that felt like being squeezed by bones. That's when Dad saw me. His face went from fake smile to pure disgust in seconds. "Oh my gosh, did you get softer? You look like an effing woman." Before I could respond, he grabbed my wrist. "Feel that? Like a little girl's. Marcus, show him what a real man's hand feels like." Marcus held up his destroyed hands, fingers bent wrong, scar tissue everywhere. "Been training with broken glass, bro. Can't feel shat anymore. It's beautiful." That's when I noticed the table covered in weapons, brass knuckles, a baseball bat with nails, broken bottles. "Tonight, you boys are gonna fight for real. Winner gets my respect. Loser, well, losers don't deserve to be called my son." I tried to leave, but Dad blocked the door. "You ain't no son of mine anyway. Prancing around with your degree in your soft hands, probably letting that woman of yours boss you around like a bitch." He picked up the bat. "Maybe this'll finally make you a man." Marcus was shadowboxing, completely brainwashed. "Come on, bro. It'll be like old times. Don't worry, I'll go easy since you're so weak now." That's when Dad swung the bat at my head. I ducked and heard it smash into the wall. My girlfriend just stood there, frozen with fear. Marcus started laughing. "Yeah, that's it. Fight back." Dad swung again, grazing my shoulder. I felt something pop and warm blood soak through my shirt. "Fight like a man!" he screamed, coming at me again. I managed to grab a chair and throw it at him, then ran for the kitchen door. Marcus tackled me from behind. "You're not leaving until you man up." They both started kicking me while I curled up trying to protect my head. Suddenly, Sophia disappeared, and 2 minutes later she returned with a row of police officers. Dad was still ranting about making men out of boys when they arrested him. Sophia was telling me she's sorry for embarrassing me and asking me if I was sure I still liked her. But all the noise around me simply came in one ear out the other, because I was going to have a relationship with Sophia, and I was going to make my family back off. And make my family back off I did. The ambulance crew was still trying to convince me to go to the hospital when the DV specialist arrived. She took one look at my shoulder and the blood soaking through my shirt and immediately started documenting everything. Sophia stood next to me, her phone still recording as backup evidence, while I gave my statement to the officers. From the patrol car, I could hear Dad screaming about liberal conspiracies and how the government was trying to destroy real American families. The neighbors had come out to watch, and I saw Mrs. Chen from next door shaking her head as Dad ranted about how this was all part of some agenda to feminize men. Marcus had switched completely. The moment the cops showed up, his whole demeanor changed. He told the officers we were just roughhousing, that things got a little out of hand, but it was nothing serious. While he was putting on this performance, I saw him texting rapidly on his phone. Within minutes, my phone started buzzing with notifications from the family group chat I'd forgotten I was still in. The texts from Marcus were already spreading through the family network. Brother lost it and attacked Dad, had to call the cops on his own father. Always knew those liberal schools would mess him up. My phone showed 17 missed calls from various aunts and uncles within the span of 10 minutes. That's when Mother finally emerged from the house. She was fully dressed, makeup perfect, like she'd been preparing for this moment. She walked straight to the officers and started explaining how this was all a misunderstanding. She pointed to the blood on my shirt and claimed I'd probably hurt myself in the scuffle, that these boys had always played rough. When they asked her to give a statement about what she witnessed, she refused, saying she didn't want to get involved in her son's squabbles. The DV specialist pulled me aside while the officers dealt with my parents. She explained that Dad's clean record meant he'd likely make bail quickly. I had a choice to make: press charges immediately with what we had, or take time to build a stronger case. The problem was, the 72-hour window for certain evidence collection was already ticking down. I decided to press charges. The moment I signed the paperwork, my phone exploded again. This time it was Marcus posting screenshots to the family WhatsApp. Screenshots of my therapy notes from years ago. Notes I'd written in a private journal that had somehow ended up in his hands. He'd highlighted every mention of anger, every time I'd written about wishing Dad would just disappear, removing all context about the abuse that prompted those feelings. The next morning, Sophia called me from the hospital where she worked. Her voice was shaking. Someone had slashed all 4 tires on her car in the employee parking lot. Security hadn't seen anything. An hour later, my supervisor at the youth center called. They'd received an anonymous complaint from a concerned citizen about my violent tendencies and unstable behavior. The caller had specifically mentioned that I'd just assaulted my own father. Mother's text came through while I was trying to deal with the tire situation. Why are you destroying us? Is this what that education taught you? To tear apart your own family? I missed my meeting with the prosecutor because I was waiting for the tow truck. Dad's lawyer was already working, arguing this was just a family dispute, not a real assault. He painted a picture of a son who'd been estranged from his family, who'd come back and started trouble. The prosecutor called me afterward, frustrated that I hadn't shown up to provide crucial context. 2 days later, Dad made bail. Mother had used her entire retirement fund to pay for it. The first thing he did was drive to my apartment complex and take a selfie outside my building. He posted it on Facebook with the caption, "Just checking on my son, worried about his mental health after his breakdown." I spent the next 3 days installing security cameras and changing all my locks. Sophia suggested we stay at her parents' house for a while, but I could see the strain in her eyes. She was scared, and I couldn't blame her. This wasn't what she'd signed up for. We had our first real fight when she mentioned that maybe I was bringing danger into her life unnecessarily. That's when my neighbor knocked on my door. He had a Ring doorbell camera that had caught something interesting. The footage showed Dad's truck parked outside my apartment building 3 days before Marcus's ceremony. He'd been sitting there for hours, just watching. In the early morning footage, you could see him get out and pop his trunk, checking something inside. When he moved, the camera caught a glimpse of what looked like a baseball bat. The evidence suggested this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment attack. Dad had been planning something. But before I could get the footage to my lawyer, my workplace called again. They were suggesting I take a voluntary leave of absence while things got sorted out. The anonymous complaints had continued, and now some parents were expressing concern about having me work with their children. The coordinated campaign was in full swing. Mother was playing the victim at her book club, telling everyone how her younger son had always been troubled, how they'd tried so hard to help me, but I'd rejected my family. Dad was positioning himself as the misunderstood patriarch who just wanted his sons to be strong, and Marcus was the devoted older son trying to save his family from his unstable brother. My college essay surfaced online the next week. It was an essay I'd written about overcoming abuse, about breaking cycles of violence, but someone, I knew it had to be Marcus, had edited it carefully. All mentions of Dad's violence were removed. What remained was just my anger, my resentment, my wishes for escape. Posted out of context, it made me look like I'd always been the aggressive one. Work emails started going wrong. Inappropriate messages were being sent from my account to parents of teen clients. IT traced the IP address back to Dad's house, but they couldn't prove he'd been the one sitting at the computer. 3 of my coworkers who'd been supportive initially started distancing themselves after getting calls from Mother. She'd expressed her concern about my history of violence and mental health issues, warning them that I might be dangerous. The legal system moved slowly, while my life unraveled quickly. Dad's lawyer had somehow gotten access to my juvenile therapy records that were supposed to be sealed. They were from when I was 13, after an ER visit that my parents had claimed was from a sports injury. The therapy had been mandated by a suspicious doctor. Now those records were being used as evidence of my disturbed history. I was desperate to salvage something of my reputation. Marcus agreed to meet me at a public cafe, promising he wanted to help calm things down. I should have known better. The whole time we talked, he was recording. When I spoke about my childhood trauma, about how I'd wished Dad would just disappear when I was young, Marcus captured it all. Later, the edited audio would surface with my words rearranged. I wished he would just disappear became, I wanted him gone. The local news picked up the story after Marcus leaked the edited audio. Social worker threatens father's life, ran as a headline, with Marcus quoted as a concerned source close to the family. The reporter who ran the story turned out to be one of Dad's poker buddies. During all this, Dad revealed something that made my stomach drop. He transferred all his assets to Marcus months ago. If I tried to sue for damages, there would be nothing to collect. The planning had been extensive, careful, calculated. This wasn't just about one night of violence. This was about complete destruction. Sophia's parents saw the news coverage. They called her, demanding she leave me. They didn't want their daughter associated with violence. Sophia defended me, but I could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. Every time her phone rang, she flinched. Every time we went out, she looked over her shoulder. I managed to get a restraining order against Dad, but the judge ruled that Marcus and Mother weren't threats. They hadn't physically attacked me after all. The judge mentioned the complicated family dynamics and suggested we might benefit from mediation. The order preventing Dad from coming near me also meant he couldn't appear in court, which his lawyer spun as him being too traumatized to face his violent son. During my final visit to the family house to collect some old belongings, I planted a small recording device in the living room. I told myself it was just for protection, to gather evidence. What I captured was Dad and Marcus planning their next moves, discussing how to break me psychologically, because that's what warriors do to their enemies. The recording revealed the depth of their coordination. Every move had been planned, every attack on my reputation calculated. They knew exactly which pressure points to hit: my career, my relationship, my community standing. Dad spoke about it like a military campaign, and Marcus hung on every word, eager to prove himself as the loyal son. But I was running out of options. My professional life was crumbling, my relationship was strained, and my family had turned into my greatest enemy. The The system I'd believed in, the one I'd dedicated my career to, seemed powerless against this kind of coordinated manipulation. As I sat in my apartment reviewing the evidence I'd gathered, I realized something chilling. To fight back effectively, I might have to become more like them. Use their tactics, play their games. The thought made me sick. But what choice did I have? They were destroying everything I'd built, and playing by the rules wasn't working. Sophia found me there, surrounded by legal documents and evidence files. She sat down beside me, took my hand, and asked the question I'd been dreading. What are you willing to sacrifice to win this? I didn't have an answer yet, but I knew the war was just beginning. The answer came to me that night when Dad's former co-worker Jen showed up at the youth center's fundraising event. She approached me during the silent auction, gushing about this amazing new man she'd been dating. When she showed me his photo on her phone, my blood ran cold. Dad had infiltrated my professional circle through her. The timing wasn't coincidental. They'd met at last year's holiday party, where I'd introduced her to my parents. Within days, childhood photos started circulating on social media. Marcus had dug through old albums and posted carefully selected images. One showed me crying during warrior training with the caption, "Always been weak." Another featured Marcus bleeding but smiling, labeled "Real Warrior." The comments praised Dad's parenting methods and questioned how someone so unstable could work with vulnerable youth. Mother called a family meeting at my aunt's house, claiming she wanted to help resolve things. When I arrived, she'd assembled a tribunal of relatives. She insisted I'd always been dramatic, that the bruises in those old photos were just normal boyhood roughhousing. My aunt mentioned the CPS visit when I was 8, reframing it as me lying for attention rather than a concerned teacher reporting visible injuries. The psychological warfare intensified when one of my client's parents approached Marcus about mentoring their son. The parent had seen the news coverage and decided Marcus represented the kind of strong male role model their child needed. Marcus enthusiastically agreed, even adopting the name of my own mentorship program. He started posting about real guidance for young men, contrasting it with my soft approach. I listened to the recording from my parents' house again. Dad's voice was clear as he instructed Marcus on psychological tactics. He explained how to identify pressure points, how to isolate targets from support systems, how to make someone question their own reality. Marcus absorbed every word like scripture. My professional review board scheduled a hearing after receiving multiple complaints. Parents who'd never met me were suddenly concerned about my history of instability. The hearing date was set strategically, 3 days before my criminal trial against Dad. I'd have to choose which battle to fight properly. Desperate to understand their strategy, I created fake social media accounts and joined Dad's supporter groups. I praised his parenting philosophy, shared his posts, even commented about how modern society had gone soft. The deception made me sick, but I needed to know what they were planning. That's how I discovered the Warrior Camp. Dad was launching a program for boys using my own childhood trauma as the curriculum. My best friend from the MSW program called to withdraw her professional reference. Her practice couldn't afford the association with scandal. She'd been getting calls asking about my mental state during grad school, whether I'd shown signs of violence. The narrative was spreading beyond family into every corner of my life. In a moment of desperation, I posted my unedited therapy notes online, hoping transparency would counter their manipulation. The move backfired spectacularly. People focused on every angry thought I'd expressed, every moment of rage against my abusers. The comments praised Dad's discipline and suggested I needed more of it. The prosecutor handling my assault case offered a plea deal. Dad would plead to a misdemeanor, attend anger management, avoid jail time. He'd maintain his innocence while I'd have to accept that version of events. The alternative meant a trial where Dad's lawyer promised to expose my lifelong mental health issues. Hospital records from my childhood started surfacing in discovery. Multiple ER visits for sports injuries, each with Mother's signature on the intake forms. She'd been present for every suspicious injury, never once questioning the explanations. The pattern was obvious to anyone looking, but legally proving abuse from decades ago was nearly impossible. Dad's influence reached into my graduate school. My former thesis advisor posted about always sensing something unstable in me, though he'd written glowing recommendations just 2 years earlier. The revisionist history was spreading backwards through my entire life. Every small victory I'd achieved was being reframed as manipulation. The restraining order became evidence of my pattern of using the system against family. My voluntary leave from work transformed into proof of guilt. The narrative was shifting, and I was losing control of my own story. Sophia faced an impossible choice when the dance studio owner, now Dad's client, demanded she stop supporting me publicly or lose her job. She chose me, but the financial pressure mounted immediately. We'd been living paycheck to paycheck, and now half our income vanished. Her parents offered to help, but only if she moved back home, alone. I found myself documenting everything obsessively. Cameras in every room, recordings of every call, screenshots of every interaction. I checked locks multiple times, tracked Dad's social media constantly, monitored Marcus's movements. The hypervigilance was exhausting, but I couldn't stop. I was becoming the paranoid person they'd painted me as. The breaking point came during an argument with Sophia about grocery money. She'd bought name-brand cereal instead of generic, and I exploded. The words that came out of my mouth were Dad's words, his exact phrases about waste and weakness. Sophia's face went white as she recognized them too. Marcus's ex-girlfriend reached out through a mutual friend. She had a USB drive with evidence of Dad's financial fraud, years of tax evasion, embezzlement from his business, but she'd obtained it by accessing his computer without permission during their relationship. Using it would be illegal, but it might be the leverage I needed. Mother filed for divorce, but the timing revealed her true motive. By separating her assets from Dad's, she could protect them from any civil suit I might file. Her lawyer, Dad's longtime friend, painted me as the aggressive son son who'd driven a wedge between loving parents. The divorce was strategic, not real. I was hemorrhaging money on legal fees. 2 lawyers, one for the criminal case and one to fight the defamation, were draining every penny. Sophia's savings disappeared into retainers and filing fees. We moved into her parents' basement, the ultimate admission of defeat. The grocery store confrontation was orchestrated perfectly. Dad just happened to be shopping when I was, just happened to end up in the same aisle. When I turned to leave, he stepped into my path. When I moved around him, he claimed I'd shoved him. Store security footage would show me as the aggressor, him as the victim trying to shop in peace. My therapy license suspension letter arrived during Dad's first podcast episode. He'd started a show called Raising Warriors in a Weak World, using our family as a case study. He described my education as indoctrination, my career as enabling weakness in young men. The suspension meant everything I'd built to escape him was crumbling. Mother's mediation offer came with conditions. I'd drop all charges, publicly apologize for misunderstanding Dad's parenting, and admit to having anger issues that predated any family conflict. In exchange, they'd stop the public campaign against me. She presented it as generous, a way to restore family harmony. My attempt to expose the warrior camp backfired when a parent pulled their child from Dad's program after my warning. The child had been struggling with confidence, and the parent blamed me for sabotaging their son's progress. Social media posts about the vindictive social worker attacking innocent children spread quickly. Sophia's sister, who'd initially supported us, started echoing Dad's talking points during family dinners. She asked if I was really worth destroying her whole family over. The infection was spreading into Sophia's family now, the poison seeping into every relationship I had. To obtain crucial evidence, I had to publicly state that I'd misunderstood Dad's methods. The statement would be used against me, but without it, I couldn't access the records I needed. Each compromise chipped away at my integrity, exactly as Dad had planned. Bank records revealed Dad's financial fraud clearly, but they also showed a loan I'd taken from the family business at 18 for college. I'd paid it back with interest, but Dad's lawyer would frame it as theft, establishing a pattern of taking from the family. The trial date moved up suddenly due to the judge's schedule conflict. Instead of 3 weeks to prepare, I had 3 days. Dad's lawyer had requested the change, knowing I couldn't be ready. Every procedural move was calculated to increase pressure. Dad's true goal became clear through the recorded conversations. He didn't just want to win the case. He wanted to ensure I could never work with vulnerable populations again. This was about more than family. Years ago, I'd reported a similar family to CPS, and Dad's friend had lost custody. This was revenge by proxy. Mother's divorce proceedings required me to testify as a hostile witness. I had to admit to a pattern of family violence, technically true, but stripped of context. My words would be used to paint me as the latest in a generational cycle of abuse. Desperation drove me to threaten Marcus with exposing his steroid abuse unless he recanted his statements. The threat worked. He provided evidence of Dad's manipulation, but the victory was hollow. Sophia watched me use Dad's own tactics, saw me become the very thing I'd fought against. Marcus's warning echoed in my head as I reviewed the evidence he'd provided. I'd won this battle by becoming like Dad. The evidence was immediately challenged as coerced, potentially inadmissible. The judge considered throwing out everything I'd gathered through aggressive means. The real war wasn't legal, it was for my soul. Each tactical victory using Dad's methods was a moral defeat. I was winning battles while losing myself, exactly as he'd planned. The recording equipment, the fake social media accounts, the threats and manipulation. I'd become a mirror of my abuser. Former clients' parents started enrolling in Dad's warrior program. They'd seen my instability in the news and decided his methods must have merit. Young boys who needed help were being fed the same poison that had destroyed Marcus, and I was powerless to stop it. Witnesses began refusing to testify. Dad's supporters had targeted their businesses, their families, their reputations. The judge mentioned potential mistrial due to witness intimidation from both sides. We'd turned the legal system into a battlefield, with innocents caught in the crossfire. I accessed Dad's email through our old shared family computer at my aunt's house. I had to pretend interest in reconciliation, play the repentant son while copying files. The emails revealed extensive coordination with Marcus and Mother, but accessing them violated the restraining order. A truth emerged from those emails that shattered my assumptions. Dad genuinely believed his methods created strong men. He saw my education and career as proof of his failure as a father. In his mind, he was saving future generations from the weakness he'd failed to hit out of me. My recorded therapy sessions with teen clients surfaced during discovery. Every time I'd shared my own trauma to connect with struggling kids was reframed as projection, as inability to maintain professional boundaries. My healing journey became evidence of professional incompetence. The breakthrough came when a second neighbor revealed they had security footage of the assault, clear video evidence of Dad attacking me with a bat, but sharing it meant exposing the neighbor to retaliation. They had young sons, the same age I'd been when the abuse started. I made the choice to use the video despite the neighbor's pleading. Within days, Dad's supporters targeted their business with negative reviews and harassment. Another family was being destroyed because of our war. The pattern of collateral damage was expanding. Dad's lawyer used my witness destruction pattern brilliantly. Every person I'd pressured to testify had suffered consequences. The community saw me as a troublemaker destroying the town's peace. Local news called it a family feud tearing the community apart. Professional contacts cut all ties. Personal relationships crumbled. Dad still had his supporters, his business. His narrative of the strong father failed by weak sons. I had evidence and anger and a growing recognition that I'd become everything I'd once fought against. The judge ordered mediation before trial. We'd sit across a table, father and son, with a mediator trying to find common ground. The courthouse where I'd once helped